They protected every lazy supervisor in that office until the week they needed me to train them. That was the week I handed in my 2-week notice. I still remember my boss, Hal Granger, staring down at my resignation letter like I had slid a personal insult across his desk. He looked at it, then at me, then past me at the conference room schedule taped behind him. My name was everywhere. Monday, train 3 new account coordinators. Tuesday, billing correction walkthrough. Wednesday, supervisor onboarding for Greg and Lena. Thursday, client complaint escalation review. Friday, the new performance reporting process. The office was already short-staffed. 2 supervisors barely did their jobs. 1 had just gone out on leave. Customer complaints were piling up. New hires sat in cubicles with training binders they did not understand. Half the shared drive was a disaster. And I was the only person in that building who knew where everything was, how the accounts worked, and which client problems were about to explode. My resignation letter sat beside overdue escalation reports, a half-finished training binder, and the schedule showing Hal expected me to spend the next month saving the branch. Finally, he said, "Maya, this is really bad timing." I almost laughed, because 2 months earlier that same man had sat behind that same desk, lowered his voice, and told me not to call HR because it would make things complicated. Well, complicated had arrived. This time, it came with my signature at the bottom and a job offer from another company that paid almost twice as much. I did not start at Evermark Client Services as anyone important. I had no industry experience. I did not know the software, billing codes, client tiers, escalation rules, or even which printer everyone avoided because it jammed every 3rd page. I started as a customer account coordinator in a cubicle near the back hallway, across from the copier, and close enough to the break room to hear every microwave beep, whispered complaint, and fake laugh from management. Evermark was a regional client operations company. We handled customer accounts, service scheduling, billing corrections, client complaints, account notes, and support requests for home and business service companies. From the outside, nothing looked urgent. Inside, one missed email could become a screaming client, a broken contract, or a billing mess that took 6 weeks to fix. On my first day, I was overwhelmed, and I knew it. So I listened. I kept a beat-up spiral notebook with sticky notes everywhere, folded pages, arrows, and warnings to myself like, "Do not promise callback before checking dispatch board," and "If account starts with 74B, check old contract folder first." I asked questions constantly. Not helpless questions. I wanted to understand why things were done the way they were done. I asked Marisol in billing why some credits needed manager approval. I asked Dev at the front desk how he knew which calls to transfer. I asked Nina, an older coordinator, why everyone groaned when certain names hit the inbox. I even asked the janitors which offices were still occupied after hours because I wanted to know who actually stayed late and who just left the lights on. That was how I met Mr. Alvarez, one of the evening janitors. He was quiet, polite, and invisible to most of management. People walked around him while he emptied trash like he was furniture. I always said hello. I learned his name. I learned his wife packed him soup in the winter. And he knew which managers were working and which were hiding with the door shut. One night, when I was still new, I was at my desk after 7 trying to fix a billing correction that kept bouncing back. Mr. Alvarez rolled by with his cart and said, "You're still here?" I said, "Unfortunately." He smiled, looked toward the supervisor offices and said, "You're nice. Be careful who you trust upstairs." At the time, I thought he meant gossip. Later, I realized he was giving me the first real warning anyone dared to say out loud. The strange thing about Evermark was that the people with the lowest titles usually knew the most. The front desk knew who lied about client calls. Customer service knew which supervisors never answered questions. Billing knew who blamed them for mistakes they did not make. The janitors knew whose office lights stayed on while the keyboard never moved. I paid attention to all of it. I stayed late when needed. I came in early when an account was messy. I helped coworkers when their inboxes were drowning. If someone cried in the break room after a bad call, I did not pretend I missed it. If the front desk was slammed, I took calls. If billing needed notes cleaned up, I did it. If a customer was angry, I did not dump them on someone else just because I could. Little by little, people came to me. At first, it was small things. Maya, do you remember how to fix this hold? Maya, do you have that apology template? Maya, can you check this before I send it? Then customers asked for me by name. A client service manager copied me on an email and wrote, Maya has been very helpful getting this resolved. Hal forwarded me a customer compliment with, nice work, kiddo. I hated being called kiddo, but I let it go. Back then, I still believed good work protected you. 8 months in, Hal called me into his office and said they wanted to promote me to office supervisor. I was proud. I had not walked in acting like I deserved anything. I worked, learned, and tried not to make anyone else's day harder. The promotion email said I had demonstrated leadership, strong client focus, and exceptional ownership of branch processes. Very polished. Very Evermark. People congratulated me. The front desk hugged me. Marisol brought me a muffin the next morning and said, please don't become weird now. I promised I would not. But the red flags started almost immediately. Management at Evermark had a look. Older men in button-down shirts and expensive watches, sitting at the head of the conference room, talking about culture while interrupting every woman who explained the actual work. Hal was polished on the surface. Perfect hair, shiny shoes, a leadership seminar voice. He liked saying, let's not create friction. We need to protect the branch dynamic, and perception matters. He also called women sweetheart, kiddo, young lady, and, when annoyed, emotional. Never obvious enough for one sentence to become the issue. Always wrapped in a smile. Always followed by, you know I'm kidding. Always said in front of people who suddenly got very interested in their coffee. His boss, Victor Malloy, was worse in a quieter way. Victor did not make as many comments, but when he spoke, the room tightened. He looked at people like numbers on a bad report and shut them down with phrases like, that's a culture fit issue, or let's not get emotional about operational reality. That usually meant, stop complaining and do more work. The old boys club culture was not hidden. It was treated like weather. Everyone knew it was there. Everyone worked around it, and nobody wanted to be the person who said, why are we pretending this is normal? Certain women were favorites. They got better schedules and got away with things others would be written up for. One supervisor disappeared for 2 hours and came back with coffee from across town, and Hal joked she was networking. A front desk employee was 5 minutes late because her kid's bus was delayed, and suddenly we needed a conversation about accountability. There were open secrets about managers dating coworkers, cheating on spouses, burying policy violations, and promoting people who made Victor comfortable instead of people who knew the job. I heard the stories. I saw enough to believe most of them. At first, I told myself it had nothing to do with me. That was naive. I had been given a shot at management, and I wanted to use it well. I thought if I kept my head down, treated people right, and improved the work, the politics would stay away. That was the dumbest professional lesson I had to learn. Because once I became good at the job, I did not become protected. I became a problem. For the next couple of years, I became the person everyone depended on. I updated training binders that had not been touched in 4 years. I reorganized the shared drive so people could find forms without opening 12 folders named Old, Old 2, and Final Use this one. I created client complaint templates, made a billing correction checklist, and started tracking satisfaction reports weekly instead of waiting until the end of the month when it was too late. I trained new coordinators, coached nervous employees, helped service reps understand angry clients, and taught people how to write notes that protected them later. The results showed. Response time improved. Complaints dropped. Billing corrections came back cleaner. Escalations still happened, but we handled them faster. I even won 2 internal performance awards, which were basically printed certificates and a sad little gift card. But still, people noticed. Unfortunately, the wrong people noticed too. The other supervisors changed around me. Greg was the worst. He had been there longer and always looked busy from far away. He carried a folder, walked fast, sighed loudly, and kept his office door cracked enough to look available while never actually being available. If a difficult customer called, he was on another line. If a new hire had a question, he was about to jump into a meeting. If closing tasks needed doing, he had a client follow-up that couldn't wait. But if there was cake in the break room, Greg appeared like someone had paged him. Lena was another supervisor and one of Hal's favorites. She was not stupid. That made it worse. She knew enough to avoid work without looking useless. Whenever she was asked to do anything outside her preferred tasks, she said, "I'm not comfortable with that." If anyone pushed, she threatened HR. Hal folded every time. Todd was quieter but had mastered vanishing. He could disappear inside the building, empty training room, dark office, back corner of the conference room, anywhere except where customers, employees, or responsibility could find him. The more I improved things, the more they resented me. First came the comments. "Must be nice to be Hal's new star. Some of us don't have time to make pretty binders. Careful, Maya, you're making the rest of us look bad." One day, Greg said, "Some of us actually earned our way up before management started fast-tracking people." He said it in front of 2 coordinators I had just trained. I smiled and said, "Then I'm sure you'll have no problem helping with the client escalation review today." He did not help. Instead, he told Hal I was assigning work outside the agreed process. That became the pattern. They would not do the work, but they complained about how I asked them to do it. Then the sabotage started. Small at first. A training document disappeared from the shared drive. Printed callback lists vanished from my office. My computer settings changed twice in 1 week. Billing correction forms I had sorted by urgency got mixed together. Even my stapler kept moving from the left side of my desk into a drawer. That sounds ridiculous, but when everything around you is touched just enough to make you question yourself, even a stapler feels like a message. Then a customer follow-up template I created was deleted from the shared folder. I checked the recycle bin. Gone. I asked IT what happened. The technician said the file had been deleted under a supervisor-level login, but he could not say more without approval. That was when my stomach dropped. It was not a mistake. Someone with access was doing it. A coordinator named Elise pulled me aside near the copier one afternoon. She looked nervous, like talking to me was risky. She said, "I don't want to get involved, but after you leave, people go in your office." I asked, "What people?" She looked toward the supervisor hallway. "Greg was in there yesterday. Your drawer was open." I said, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I thought maybe he had permission. He did not. The next day, another employee told me Lena had been laughing in the break room about reorganizing Maya's little command center. That was what she called my office. The office was small, but it mattered to me. It had 1 window, a metal filing cabinet, a whiteboard, 1 extra chair for private conversations, training binders, escalation notes in locked folders, and a framed print my sister gave me when I got promoted. One Monday, I came in and found it rearranged. Not officially moved, not cleaned, rearranged. The extra chair was gone. My whiteboard was wiped clean, training binders were stacked on the floor, my framed print was face down on the filing cabinet, my box of labeled folders sat outside the door like trash. I went straight to Hal. I said, "Did someone move my office around?" Without looking up, he said, "We're making some space adjustments." I said, "Without telling me?" He sighed. "Maya, don't take everything personally." That became his shield. Files missing? Don't take it personally. Coworkers warning me people were in my office? Don't take it personally. Folders renamed before a new hire class? Don't take it personally. Calendar invites disappearing from meetings I was supposed to lead? Don't take it personally. Callback lists altered so it looked like I failed to follow up? Don't take it personally. Amazing how many personal things I was supposed to not take personally. Still, I tried to handle it correctly. I asked Greg calmly if he had moved anything from my office. He looked offended before I finished. "Wow, so now I'm being accused?" I said, "I'm asking because someone saw you in my office." He said he went in to find a training binder because my filing system was impossible. My system was labeled by client type, issue category, and revision date. Greg's system was piles. I said, "Next time, ask me." He said, "Maybe next time don't hoard company resources." That phrase showed up again 2 days later. Paula, another supervisor, asked me for help finding an old account audit template. I told her I had a copy in the shared folder, but when I searched, it was gone. I said I would check access history with IT if needed. The next morning, HR called me. They said they had received a concern that I was trying to access restricted information and blame another supervisor for missing files. For a few seconds, I could not answer. I was the one whose files were being deleted. I was the one whose office was entered. I was the one trying to keep training materials from disappearing. And somehow HR had been told I was the problem. The complaint said I had been aggressive, was monitoring colleagues, and had created a hostile environment by accusing people without evidence. That word hostile scared me. In corporate language, hostile is not casual. It means someone is building a case. I asked who made the complaint. HR would not tell me. But I knew the circle it came from. I explained calmly. I said files were missing, folders renamed, documents deleted, and employees had told me people were entering my office. I gave examples and dates. I mentioned IT had confirmed one file was deleted under a supervisor-level login. HR gave me a case number. I wrote it in my notebook. That night, I started documenting everything. I made a folder on my personal computer called Evermark Timeline. I did not save confidential client information. I only documented dates, times, general descriptions, email subject lines, meeting invites, allowed screenshots of file timestamps, and notes about witnesses. I took photos of my office when I left. I sent follow-up emails after conversations. If Hal told me something verbally, I wrote, "Per our conversation today, my understanding is," and sent it back. He hated that. A week after HR called, Hal asked me into his office and told me to shut the door. He had that calm manager face on, the one they use when pretending to help while protecting themselves. He said, "Maya, I need you to be careful with how you're handling this." I said, "Handling what?" "The HR situation." "You mean the complaint against me or the missing files?" He looked annoyed. "All of it. We don't want to escalate unnecessarily. Calling HR creates a paper trail we may not be able to control." That sentence changed everything. He did not yell. He said it gently, like advice. But I heard the real message. Don't protect yourself. Don't make us answer questions. Don't put anything in writing. Stay quiet so we can manage the story. I asked, "Are you telling me not to contact HR?" He shifted instantly. "I'm saying let me handle it at the branch level." I said, "Hal, someone already contacted HR about me." He said, "That's exactly why we don't need to add more fuel." I walked out knowing one thing clearly. They were not going to protect me. They were going to protect the easiest version of the company. And that version required me to be quiet, overworked, and grateful. So I called HR myself. Not emotionally, not ranting, not crying. I asked for the case number and said I needed to add information. Then I sent one organized email. The subject line was simple: additional documentation regarding retaliation, file deletion, and workplace concerns. I attached everything in labeled sections: missing files, deleted or renamed shared drive folders, email chains showing training materials existed before they disappeared, calendar invites that had been changed, names of employees who saw supervisors in my office, notes from Greg, the false complaint summary, and Hal's warning that calling HR would create a paper trail they could not control. I kept the language boring on purpose. No insults, no drama, just facts. On this date, this happened. This person witnessed it. This file was deleted. This meeting changed. This supervisor had access. This manager discouraged escalation. This pattern began after I raised concerns. I also included performance metrics, training records, customer satisfaction reports, and client emails thanking me. Not to brag, to show I was not inventing drama to cover bad work. I was one of the people holding the place together. HR replied 2 days later and said they were expanding the review. That should have been the moment something changed. Something did change. Management dumped more work on me. Suddenly, I had to train 3 new coordinators because nobody knew the process like Maya. I had to rebuild the training binder because some documents had become outdated or misplaced. Misplaced. That was their word for deleted. I was also assigned to onboard 2 newly promoted supervisors. One was Greg. Greg, who had been seen in my office. Greg, who could not handle a billing correction without help. Greg, who somehow needed me to train him on processes he claimed I was hoarding. The other was Lena, who treated basic tasks like personal attacks. When I asked Hal why I was training people involved in my complaint, he said, "We need to separate operational needs from personal friction. Personal friction. Not sabotage, not retaliation, not a false HR complaint. Personal friction." After HR started asking questions, Victor called me into a meeting with Hal. He sat at the far end of the conference room and said, We're reviewing the situation. In the meantime, we need leadership from you. I asked, what does that mean? He said, it means not letting distractions affect branch performance. I realized then he did not care who was lying, deleting files, or making employees miserable. He cared that reports looked bad. He cared that customers were complaining. He cared that new employees were not trained. Most of all, he cared that the person who could fix those problems was creating a paper trail. For the next few weeks, I did my job well. But something in me had shifted. I stopped hoping they would become fair. I stopped trying to prove I was worth protecting. I started applying elsewhere, quietly. I used lunch breaks and evenings. I rewrote my resume around operations, client accounts, training, process improvement, escalation management, and team leadership. I did not mention office politics, old boys clubs, or sabotage. I just described the work I had actually done. Once I put it on paper, I realized how much experience I had built. Evermark treated me like I should be grateful for a chair at the table. Another company saw someone who knew how to run an office. Brightline Home and Business Solutions called after my second application. They were a growing competitor with better structure, better technology, and better benefits. Their client operations department was expanding, and they needed someone who could train staff, clean up account processes, and handle escalations without falling apart. The first interview felt strange because they asked real questions. How do you handle a difficult client? How do you train overwhelmed employees? How do you measure whether a process works? What would you do in your first 90 days? And when I answered, they listened. My second interview was in person. Their office had natural light, clean conference rooms, working printers, labeled supply cabinets, and a front desk employee who smiled like she was not bracing for impact. The manager, Dana, walked me through the team area and introduced people by name. This is Renee, our billing lead. This is Marcus, commercial accounts. This is Leah, who keeps all of us sane. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody hid. Nobody made weird comments. Nobody called me kiddo. At the end, Dana said, "You've clearly been carrying more than your title." I almost cried in my car, not because it was a movie moment, because I had not realized how long it had been since someone looked at my work and understood it without making me beg. A week later, Brightline offered me the job. The salary was not quite double, but close enough that I read the number 3 times. Better benefits, better paid time off, a real office, a clear reporting structure, a training budget, and a manager who said, "We don't expect one person to be the emergency plan." That sentence alone felt like a raise. I accepted. Then I waited. Not long. I was not trying to destroy Evermark or risk my new job. But I was not going to rearrange my life to make my resignation convenient for people who had made my life miserable. I waited until the week the new hires started. The week Greg and Lena were scheduled for supervisor onboarding. The week customer satisfaction reports were due. The week 2 major client accounts had unresolved billing issues. The week Hal had already told Victor in writing that I would lead the training rollout. Then I printed my resignation letter. Short, professional, 2 weeks' notice. Final date. Thank you for the opportunity. I will assist with transition tasks during my remaining time. No emotion, no accusations, no "you'll regret this." Just the cleanest little piece of paper I had ever handed someone. Hal read it twice. Then he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I accepted a position with another company." "Doing what?" "Client operations management." His face changed when he heard management. He said, "Can we talk numbers?" I said, "No." He blinked like he did not understand the word. I said, "I've already accepted." He rubbed his forehead. "Maya, I wish you had come to me first." That almost got me. I said, "I did come to you, several times." He had no answer. Then he said Victor would want to discuss it. Of course Victor did. 20 minutes later, Victor called. His voice was smooth, calm, and fake. "Maya, I hear we may be losing you." "Yes, I gave Hal my 2-week notice." "That's unfortunate. We were actually planning changes that would have improved your situation." I asked, "What changes?" Silence. Then he said, "There were discussions about restructuring responsibilities." I asked, "Was there a title change? Not finalized? Pay adjustment?" That would have been part of the conversation. Staffing changes. We were evaluating. In other words, nothing. They were not planning changes. They were planning to use the possibility of changes to get more work out of me. Then Victor said, "We'd like you to remain professional during the transition." I said, "I have always been professional." "Good. Then you understand how important it is that Greg and Lena are fully trained before you leave." They wanted my final 2 weeks spent training the same people who helped make my job impossible. I said, "I'll document open processes and assist with transition tasks related to my role." He said, "That sounds a little narrow." I said, "It's exactly what I'm able to offer." He did not like that. Hal liked it even less. For the next 2 weeks, he acted like a man watching a boat drift away while pretending he had not spent years drilling holes in it. Suddenly, he needed my opinion. Suddenly, he wanted to know where the updated templates were. Suddenly, he wanted me in meetings. Suddenly, he called me Maya instead of Kiddo. Greg tried to be nice for one day. He came to my office with a blank notebook and said, "So where should we start?" I said, "With the training binder." He said, "Right, where is that?" I looked at him, the one that kept getting misplaced. He had the sense to look uncomfortable. Lena was worse. She told Hal she did not feel emotionally safe being trained by me because of the history. The history, as if the history was a weather event and not a series of choices. Hal asked if I could make separate recordings for her instead. I said no, not rudely, just no. I wrote process documents. I cleaned up what I was responsible for. I sent transition emails. I made sure the employees who had relied on me had what they needed. I gave the new hires the real instructions, not the outdated mess in the old folders. I made sure Marisol had the billing checklist. I gave Dev a direct contact list so he would not be left guessing. On my last day, Mr. Alvarez stopped by while I was taking down my framed print. He said, "You got out?" I smiled. "I got out." He nodded once. Good. That meant more than any performance award Evermark ever gave me. My last hour was quiet, no speech, no dramatic confrontation, no everyone clapped moment. A few people hugged me, a few messaged later because they did not want to be seen. Marisol cried and called me a traitor, but lovingly. Dev said the front desk would probably collapse by Wednesday. Hal shook my hand and said, "Best of luck." Victor never came out of his office. I walked out carrying one box. My notebook was on top. The first week at Brightline felt like culture shock. Not because it was perfect. No company is perfect. Clients still complained, software still froze, meetings still could have been emails. But nobody treated chaos like a leadership strategy. My office was clean. My computer worked. My access was ready on day one. My manager checked in without hovering. When I asked for a process document, someone sent the current version, not 3 outdated folders and a rumor. When I stayed late in my second week to finish an account issue, Dana walked by and said, "I appreciate the effort, but don't make that a habit unless it's truly urgent." I did not know what to say. At Evermark, staying late proved loyalty. At Brightline, it needed a reason. The first time I made a suggestion in a meeting, nobody talked over me. Nobody repeated it 10 minutes later and got credit. Nobody called me emotional for pointing out a process gap. They asked questions. They took notes. They implemented part of it the next week. That was when I realized how tired I had been. Not regular tired, bone tired, the kind of tired where your body is home, but your brain is still in a conference room defending itself. I started sleeping better. I stopped checking my phone at night for a crisis. I stopped feeling sick before Monday meetings. I stopped rehearsing conversations in the shower because every sentence might be twisted later. My shoulders relaxed, my skin cleared up, I laughed more. I had energy after work, which felt suspicious at first. I also realized I had confused being needed with being valued. Evermark needed me. They'd not value me. There is a difference. About a month after I left, Hal called during lunch. I almost did not answer. Curiosity won. He started with small talk, which told me something was wrong. He asked how the new job was going, said everyone missed me, and said the office felt different without me. Then he said, "We may have an opportunity for you here if you're open to a conversation." I asked, "What kind of opportunity?" "A leadership opportunity." "What title?" He paused. There it was again, the pause where a real answer should have been. He said we'd want to discuss structure. I asked, "What pay range?" "That would depend on final responsibilities." "Who would I report to?" Another pause. likely still through branch leadership, but with more autonomy. Same boss, vague title, unknown pay, more responsibility, same building, same culture. I asked, what changed? He said, we've made adjustments. What adjustments? Greg's transition has been challenging. I stayed quiet. He continued, some employees have been resistant. I asked, resistant how? He sighed. There have been complaints about his communication style. Some people feel he talks down to them. Greg treated people like peons. That was not new. Hal said Lena was also struggling with accountability expectations, which was the nicest possible way to say she still did not want to do the job. Then he said the team trusted you. I said, I know. He did not expect that. He said we could really use your help leading the transition. There it was. Not an apology, not accountability, not we should have listened, not you were right about the retaliation. Just the same request with nicer wrapping. Come back and clean up the mess. Come back and train the people we protected. Come back and make us look stable. Come back so we do not have to admit we lost the person holding it together. I asked, is Greg still there? Yes. Is Lena still there? Yes. Is Victor still overseeing the branch? Yes, but I cut him off. Not loudly, not angrily, firmly. Then nothing important changed. He said, Maya, that's not fair. For the first time, I did not explain fairness to a man who watched me get sabotaged and told me not to create a paper trail. I said, Hal, you protected those supervisors for years. Let them run it. He said nothing, so I added, you should have listened when people were still willing to help you fix it. Then I hung up. My hands shook a little afterward. Not because I regretted it, because part of me still remembered that office, staying calm while people moved my things, deleted my work, lied about me, and called me emotional for noticing. But the shaking passed. I went back to my lunch. Then I went back to my clean office, my working computer, my normal manager, my better paycheck, and a team that did not treat basic respect like a limited resource. I still have my old Evermark notebook. The cover is bent, some pages are stained with coffee. The first half is full of notes from when I barely knew what I was doing. Billing codes, client types, system shortcuts, and names of people who helped me. I keep it in a drawer at Brightline. Not because I need it anymore. Because it reminds me I did not become good at my job by playing politics or kissing up. I became good because I listened, learned, worked hard, and treated people like human beings even when nobody important was watching. It also reminds me of something else. A company can use you and still praise you. A boss can need you and still fail you. A workplace can call you family while letting people hurt you because fixing it would be inconvenient. Leaving Evermark did not ruin my career, it gave it back to me. So sometimes I wonder, should I have left sooner, or was I right to stay long enough for them to understand exactly what they lost?